Hello control, Foxglove leader calling.
Hello Foxglove leader, this is Blue Hat Control. Send your message.
I'm stood in the control room at RAF Fairwood. I have another hour left before relief is due. Then I can stand down and go for a brew in the mess. I've been here at RAF Fairwood now for over 2 years, and since its first humble beginnings. Following the horrific attacks on Swansea in late 1940 and early 1941, and to protect the local defences along with shipping around the area, it was decided that an aerodrome would be required in the area. It was to be a base from which fighter aircraft would protect the skies over the southwest coast from Jerry bombers both day and night. Fairwood Common was chosen as the location for it to be built. At that time, the common was being used by local farmers for grazing sheep and cattle. After much opposition from the farmers, the construction was hastily carried out. Bearing in mind, there's a war on, you know. Unfortunately, 2 Bronze Age barrows have been destroyed in the construction process. I was told by a local farmer after that a cinerary urn had been retrieved from one of the barrows and is going to be called the Bishopston Birch. The construction of the aerodrome and the 3 runways has taken a year to complete. It has involved an extensive levelling and the draining of what was previously boggy common ground. 3 bellmen and 8 blister hangars have been originally built, with further improvements being made as the war has progressed. RAF Fairwood opened on June 15, 1941, nearly a year after the start of construction. As well as the aerodrome being built, there are various camps, or otherwise known as sites. These also include gun emplacements and area shelters around the location. Due to the proximity of the common, the sites which contain officers' quarters, sick quarters, operations blocks, communal area and tennis courts, as well as 2 sites for the WAFs, are spread around the area. These sites are covering the common itself, Black Hills Lane and Hen Park Lane. Even Fairwood Lodge has been requisitioned to be an officer's quarters. There are 13 sites in total. There are E-pens at the southernmost end of the aerodrome. These are earth embankments to protect the aircraft during air raids. On October the 25th, 1941, Fairwood Common became a sector station. From its opening, we have had several RAF squadrons operate from here. On June the 14th, 79 Squadron, equipped with Hurricane Mark II aircraft, arrived. On the 17th of June 1941, 600 Squadron arrived. This was a night fighter squadron equipped with Bristol Beaufighter Mark II aircraft. In late June 1941, when I arrived, another Hurricane-equipped day fighter 317 Squadron arrived. Then 504 Squadron arrived not long after, with the aerodrome coming under 10 Group RAF Fighter Command Sector Station. These squadrons, which are flying the Hawker Hurricane and Bristol Beaufighter aircraft, regularly patrol the skies both day and night, looking out for Jerry bombers. On the 23rd of January 1942, 615 Squadron, County of Surrey Squadron Auxiliary Air Force, arrived from RAF Angle. These are also equipped with Hurricane fighters. They operated here until the 17th of March, when the squadron was then moved on to Liverpool docks. In early 1942, 125 Squadron are stationed here. Initially, they were operating with Bolton Pole Defiant Nighter fighters, before switching to Beaufighters. In April 1942, the squadron successively battled against the German Baedeker night raids upon Bath. They were rewarded with bringing down Jerry aircraft as well as damaging another. The Baedeker raids were attacking targets of cultural and historical significance, rather than military ones. They have been named after the popular Jerry travel guide of the same name. On June the 23rd, 1942,
Yes, sir.
one of the Jerry's latest and prized fighter aircraft, a Fokker-Wulf FW-190, somehow mistakenly landed at RAF Pembrey by a pilot who, I was told, was disorientated after involvement in a dogfight with Spitfires over southwest England. Our commanding officer at Fairwood, Group Captain David Archley, drove to Pembrey to fetch the Jerry pilot to bring him back. Oberlant Armin Faber, I believe the Jerry's name is. During the journey back, the Jerry prisoner narrowly escaped being shot when the group captain accidentally squeezed the trigger of his service revolver when the car hit a bad pothole in the road. The discharged bullet hit the door just inches away from Armin Faber. The Jerry then spent the next 2 days as a very reluctant guest at Fairwood Common. Shortly later, the captured aircraft was flown into Fairwood itself. When it landed, what a sight. Even looking at it then, it was putting our now Typhoons to shame. I bet the War Department have made use of the technology gleaned from this aircraft. After 2 days guarding the Jerry in the officers' mess and quarters, I, along with a corporal, then escorted Faber to Swansea High Street Station, where he was then moved to London for further interrogation. On June the 27th, 1942, we had another success when one of the 125 Squadron's Viewfighter 11Fs shot down a Junkers Ju-88 off the Pembrokeshire coast. On the night of February the 16th to the 17th, 1943, Swansea had to endure a particularly heavy raid, but thankfully it has so far to date been the last air raid in Swansea. I was on duty at the time of this raid. During the attack, we came under attack ourselves from Jerry bombers. The aircraft dropped a number of bombs on the aerodrome itself. This, I'm afraid to say, caused the deaths of 3 WAFs, or Women's Auxiliary Air Force members. Fighter aircraft were scrambled straight away, with the pilot successfully chasing the bombers back over the Bristol Channel and shooting down 3 Dornier DO-217s and 2 other aircraft in the process. I hear that another Dornier 217, work number 5428 of the Staffel Squadron, Camp Schmieder 2 bomb group based at Eindhoven, was chased and intercepted by a viewfighter from 125 Squadron. The Dornier had found its way over Swansea and had dropped its load on the town at around 2200 hours, or 10 o'clock at night. Both Flight Lieutenant Bill Jameson and Pilot Officer Harold Newton, in their combat reports, claimed to have shot down at the Dornier into the sea. I was told that during the combat, the Dornier's port engine was set on fire, and at 22:25 hours, it crashed into flames into the sea just off Portainen with no survivors. I went down to Portainen the following day. I spoke to local villagers. There were many eyewitnesses on the ground that night, recalling seeing the crippled Dornier heading out to sea over the Gower Peninsula with one of its engines ablaze. Rita Mabbott, the daughter of a village policeman at Portainen, told me she remembered vividly the sight of the burning aircraft hitting the sea. Pilot Officer Newton has been awarded the DFC for his actions that night. I found out that later on the 25th of April 1943, a decomposed body of a Jerry airman was washed ashore on Rosilly Beach. The remains were identified as Ogerfriter Kurt Brand, the Dornier's observer. Going back to the night at hand, I have not seen many dead bodies up until that night. I had to help recover the bodies of the WAFs from where they fell. Even now, I feel as if I haven't recovered from that horror. I think I will take what I saw to the grave, and I'll never forget them. Never. Between the 1st of March and late June 1944, 456 Squadron are stationed at Fairwood. In that short time, the squadron brought down 6 Jerry aircraft. Between the 1st of March and late June 1944, 456 Squadron are stationed at Fairwood. In that short time, the squadron brought down 6 Jerry aircraft. Only a few weeks ago, the aerodrome has become a centre for training and retraining of squadrons. We are using Whitford Burrows as a firing range area. The Spitfires and Typhoons that are currently here are using it, as well as the 2nd TAF, who are practicing firing ammunition and warheads against oil drums and plywood targets in the sands there. Alas, over the past few years, the aerodrome has been subjected to its fair share of aircraft crashes, which have resulted in a number of fatalities. February the 19th, 1942 was a particular bad day in our history. On this date, 3 members of 172 Squadron, Royal Air Force Volunteer Reserve, died. These are Sergeant E.H. Dorr, Sergeant E.T.A. Deacon, and Pilot Officer R.P. Ferrani. The sea can be a very cruel mistress at times, and it wasn't until much later that year that the body of Pilot Officer Ferrani was located 160 degrees off Mumble's Head, west of Lundy. On the same day, there were 4 more deaths from 172 Squadron. These are J. Mullins, FPC Cross, GCV Jameson, and J.S. Haynes. They were aboard the Wellington bomber V111 Lee Light. From what I was told later, on that day, these are how events of the morning unfolded. Pilot Jameson took off from Fairwood. They were on a test and demonstration along with 8 other people, including a US Army officer and 1 ground crew. The aircraft was unarmed apart from a gun turret. The aircraft was flying over Swansea Bay when she was mistakenly attacked by anti-aircraft gunners on board the US tanker Gulf of Mexico, which was in the Bristol Channel. Those on board didn't have time to bail out, and the Wellington caught fire before crashing into the sea a mile west of Scareweather Point in Porthcawl. I understand the US Gulf of Mexico docked at Milford Haven. It was claimed that it had carried out instructions according with the CAMSI, Confidential Admiralty Merchant Shipping Instructions. British servicemen who lose their lives at home during this lousy war are often repatriated to their hometown to be buried. But this isn't always the case to the foreign squadron stationed here. They are buried at nearby cemeteries and graveyards. One such graveyard is at St Hilary's in Calais, which is only just down the road from us. The Dieppe raid was also launched on the 19th of August 1942. One of the pilots who was given support to the Canadian forces is Pilot Officer D. Ivach of 421 Squadron of the Royal Canadian Air Force based at Fairwood. On the 23rd of August 1942, Ivach was flying his Spitfire Mark V8 and was practicing dogfighting tactics with another Spitfire. Suddenly his Spitfire started a long dive. I spoke with an eyewitness not long after, Emrys Jones of Great London Farm, Park Mill, Gower. Whilst he was out cycling, he watched the aircraft's descent. Hoping the pilot would pull up, the dive over 6,000 feet turned into a spin, with the aircraft coming down on Kevin Bryn Common. To Mr. Jones's surprise, the plane was still intact. The pilot, Ivach, was dead, slumped forward in the cockpit. Ivach is the squadron's first casualty since its formation in 1942. He is buried at St Hilary's Church in Calais. On the 11th of January 1943, a Beaufighter V1F piloted by Sergeant J.G. Crummy, with Sergeant Hurst as his observer, stalled and crashed into Clyne Valley while on a daytime air test before their forthcoming night's operation. The aircraft disintegrated and burst into flames on impact, killing both crew members. Again, on March 29th, 1944, A 15th Air Force B-24D Liberator, based in Italy, was on a hush-hush mission to St Morgan in Cornwall to pick up some radar equipment, when it was diverted to Fairwood because of bad weather. Low on fuel, the pilot repeatedly tried to land, but he had to abort each time. On his third approach to the runway, the bomber ran out of fuel, and all 4 engines' power was lost. 4 of the crew hastily bailed out before the plane crashed to the ground. The pilot has recovered from his injuries that he sustained in the crash. But the crew chief, who was not normally part of the flying crew, had refused to jump and was sadly fatally injured. Another tragic incident took place in May this year, 1944. A Beaufighter of 6-8 Squadron was shot down by a fellow Beaufighter during a mock dogfight above the aerodrome. The aircraft crashed into a field just off Fairwood Common, killing 2 crew members. Only a few weeks ago, August 1944, a Wellington bomber crashed upon landing with an engine on fire. It finally came to rest amongst the woods at the end of the runway. The crew luckily survived and were mostly unharmed. I remember seeing them as we ran to help, look slightly aghast when they were needed to help push the fire engine that had broken down as it was being sent to their aid. Oh, I can hear footsteps. My relief is here. What was that? Canteen? Just down there. Laying in the graveyard of St Hilary's of Poitiers Church in Calais are the memorials of 22 RAF personnel. These include many nationalities, such as Czechs, South Africans, Canadians, who were all killed whilst based at RAF Fairwood Common during the war years.